right, the next item on the agenda is the continuation of Hagen Sports Network facility use and taping of school events. Obviously, we've heard a lot at the beginning about this. There is a lot there is some that's been embedded on Neptune that I believe was not there earlier.
Yes, my notes.
The notes, and so I know I need an opportunity to look at that first. Are all your notes embedded there, or is there? Okay. And so, if it's all right, we'll take a few minutes to review.
Sure.
Has everyone had a chance to review the notes? This is obviously a difficult issue. We don't have anything in the way of a formal item put in front of us. I will say at the outset, I was contacted by several members of the community, some with children in school and some in not. They all supported continuation of the Hagen service. In other words, they all supported having us allow Mr. Hagen to continue using the facility and broadcast the events. They felt like he'd been very beneficial to the community and provided service for many years, and that while they did not condone his behavior, they felt like he deserved another chance. So I do want to make it a part of the record that the contacts I had were very supportive of him in that respect.
Likewise, I've had a number of people contact me, and again, they were all for the continuation of of Sports Higgins Network and Greg to use. So,
as you know, I hope others will help us work through this. There are a few different angles to this. One, should Mr. Hagan continue to have access to our district office as a facility? That's further whether or not, if he does have access, would it have to be supervised? And then the other issue is it's been presented to me is whether or not then Mr. Hagan should be allowed, at least for school functions, to broadcast those events. And so those are three of the issues that have been presented to me. I don't know if that's exhaustive or exclusive. Like I said, this is not a formal item. It's got many different layers to it, and anyone can provide. If I'm not characterizing it accurately or thoroughly, please fill in any gaps.
I think there's really two issues. One is whether or not Mr. Hagan's allowed to continue videotaping school functions, and then the second issue being whether or not he's allowed to continue using the district office to broadcast not only school functions but the other parts of his network. And if he is allowed, to what extent is he allowed into the building? Correct?
Yes.
that's just what you said. Yeah.
And perhaps for the record, we should review the history a little bit. So it was back in September, and I've included the resolution that we received from the city of Toma back on September 14th. The Common Council recommended to the Joint City School Committee and the Toma School District that we allow Mr. Hagan to place his equipment at the district office, because the building that he was using that was owned by Charter was being destroyed, and he did not have a place to have his equipment. And I think at that point in time, we were all in agreement that, again, 27 years of service to our community, Mr. Hagan provided a very valuable service that people greatly appreciated. So at that point then, at our September meeting, you had agreed as a board to allow him to have a key to the district office, to come into the building, place his tapes in his machines that were at the district office. So he did bring his equipment into the district office. At the time that you approved that, part of the reason was the fact that there was no other location in Toma that we were aware of that he could place his equipment. The city had considered getting fiber optics at City Hall, but that would have cost in excess of $20,000. And again, with tight budgets, it was just seemed reasonable to have Mr. Hagan come to the district office. So that was in place from September through the time when Mr. Hagan, early April, when he was arrested. And at the time that he was arrested, again, I had received, as the superintendent, a number of calls from people supporting Mr. Hagan. I also contacted a number of his sponsors to get a sense of their continuing support of him, and people were very supportive of Mr. Hagan. They recognized again that they were not condoning his behavior, but they felt the service he provided was very valuable. And I encouraged you to hold off until the court system took care of the matter and make a decision at that point in time. However, additional information then was brought to my attention, and that information was that Mr. Hagan had inappropriately used school district resources, specifically our telephones at the district office, or one telephone there, to make contact with the individual who was arrested with him. And so in the police investigation, it was brought to our attention that the phone that was confiscated from the prostitute did have the school district telephone number on it. And that was very bothersome to me, of great concern, because Mr. Hagan was never given permission to use the telephone system. He was allowed to come into the building to put in his tapes. And at that point, we also checked to see how many phone calls had been made from the district office, and there were a considerable amount during the month preceding his arrest. So this was not a one-time phone call that he made using district resources or our telephone system. It was something that happened over the course of a month. And on the night he was arrested, 2 phone calls were made that evening from the district office. So I have grave concerns about the school district's reputation and our just allowing Mr. Hagan to come into the building without any supervision. And I think that the taxpayers of this community would have concerns with that as well. That is not how our telephones are to be used throughout our school district. And that is why I had asked him to turn in his keys. At that point, I did not deny him the ability to come in during working hours. That was still allowed. But I just felt at that point that he should not have unlimited access to the facility. And now a decision needs to be made on how to move forward with this. I do want to say, though, that in the 27 years of service to the community, I don't think there's ever been any question that Mr. Hagan has been a safety issue to students. That is not my concern at all. My concern is just allowing him to come into our building. He's not an employee, and have access when he made some poor judgments in using our school resources.
I had a phone call to our board president in regard to tonight's meeting, stating that I might not be able to make it because I have some concerns with my son, Mitchell, to go to Madison and have some checkups for muscular dystrophy. I spent 3 hours down there today with him, my wife, and the results were very beneficial. So I came back to this board meeting knowing that I would have to face the situation with Greg. In that conversation, John, I told you my feeling on it. I think Cindy was very hurt by it, but she made the right decision at that time. I don't think there was anything else the school district could do. Hearing the people tonight in support of Greg is the same. I have the same feeling as those folks. I've known Greg for all those 27 years and been very supportive of him, especially with athletic events, which I coached for Toma. And he was always a high professional person. Listening to the people and some of the statements that were made that people do make mistakes, and I certainly am one of them. It's really difficult in the light of what our citizenry expect from us. I don't know what Greg's course is if we refuse him access. What does he do? I suppose with him, it's up to him to take care of it. You know, another thing here is I'm a forgiving person, just like most of you are, I believe. And I've been on this board for 30 years, and I respect every one of the board members that I worked with, and also the administrators. Very high regard for each and every one of them. This situation is probably as difficult as I've ever had to face. That's all I have to say on this matter. I would like to hear what you other folks have to say. As far as the decision as to what we should do, I don't believe as a board member I can say, here's a key, you utilize this room as much as you want. There needs to be, as was indicated by Brian, he didn't say it, but I picked up from it, the possibility of supervision. I don't know. I'd just like to hear what the rest of the board has to say on this matter. My true gut feeling is whatever we come up with, it's in support of Greg for what he's done for this community. Where we go with that, I don't know. But I am supportive of the man from what I know of him. And my friend back there with the military hat on will understand what I say. At ease from Mr. Grovestein on this issue. I'd like to hear the rest of you.
Thank you, Mr. Grovestein.
This is a very difficult position to be in. I have no problem with Greg taping school events of any kind or anything. I think, to me, that's a moot point, and we move on. So the crux of the whole thing is the use of the facility and what we're going to do about that. I've had people call me in terms like lifeline to community, and we are supposed to be forgiving Christians. I wrote down lots of different things from the phone conversations, but I think we need to give him a second chance. Whether it's only during business hours or not, I defer to hear other opinions on that. As I've talked with Cindy in the past and other people who have questioned me about that, I have gone back to ye who have no sin cast the first stone. And I mean, there's a direct parable for I think he deserves a second chance, and he will either gain back the respect or he will hang himself. I should say respect and trust, because it's the trust that...
Do we pick this apart by first discussing whether or not to allow them to tape the school events, and then
I think we need to.
go from there?
We can work
Yeah.
backwards, sure.
Because I think there may be some consensus on that issue.
Okay. So as to the issue of taping Thomas school events, so far there is,
100% support.
from what I hear, there's not much in the way of objections to that.
I make a motion to allow Mr. Hagan to continue taping school events.
Okay.
Second.
The motion and a second to allow Mr. Hagan to continue broadcasting school events, taping. Is there any further discussion on that? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So the ayes have it, and the motion carries. Mr. Hagan would be allowed to continue taping and/or broadcasting school events. I guess as we work on this spectrum, then it's, as I would see it, then deciding, well, you can't decide one without the other in terms of access or just access under supervision. I mean, they sort of, you almost have to discuss them.
Together.
Together, yeah.
Well, by deciding one, you sort of decide the other, it seems to me. No one really has, I guess, spoken out strongly in saying, I would absolutely be against any access. I'm still struggling with that personally. I have heard nothing but support, and that's on the record. Your service and contributions are very inspiring. I am a little frustrated that we're sort of put in this position where Mr. Hagan is the victim and we're sort of now being asked to be the bad person. And there was a breach of trust. I think Mr. Hagan has admitted that. This is our headquarters. This is the nerve center of where our top employees work, and to have the facilities being used for illicit purposes is still very, very troubling to me, so that I still have pause about access in general. And I don't know if no one else shares that concern. I
would
can
just like
understand
to
that.
ask for clarification, Mr. President,
Yes.
whether the access includes the broadcasting. I mean, can he still broadcast without the access?
No.
Here's
He
the
needs to find another location.
He needs to find another location, just for clarification purposes, though.
But I think to really be candid here, as it's been presented to me, it's not very realistic, at least at this point, for Mr. Hagan to continue on without our facility. The trouble and the expense to do it someplace else is a challenging prospect, and I just want it to be clear to people when we're voting on this. Basically, if we deny access, it very well could deprive him of continuing on.
Okay.
To be fair to Mr. Hagan in this decision.
To be the end of Hagen Sports Network.
I have a question. If this was, if we were, this is a special situation, of course, but if this were an actual employee of the district who was accused of doing this, and with everything that's laid out in front of us, what would the course of action be?
That question has come up. I mean, that is an obvious question, and I have to believe that
I mean,
it
they
would be
probably
grounds for
terminate it,
termination.
right? Yeah.
Sure.
So, I have, this goes back to the agreement with the other building, and I mean, Mr. Hagan is using our facility to basically run a business out of, and that has, I mean, I would have concern of that more than anything else, but I don't know, it's just a hard situation to deal with. So.
And your concern was discussed a lot initially when we approved that, and it occurred mostly because of the community involvement that his business has,
Yeah.
I mean, basically, we didn't want to deny the city the access to what he provides, and the access and exposure he's given the school district in very, very positive ways. So, we didn't want to cut that off for the community. And it was certainly a community effort that kept him being here within the school district. So, but I don't disagree. It's definitely an issue of trust that's been, we've lost trust. And I certainly struggling with that also, and with what that reflects upon us as a school district. So in my mind, I don't know that, I know that I could not approve unlimited access at all. I mean, that's not even an option for me, but I'm struggling with how we would accommodate anything less and support of him too. But I don't know what sort of other options we have as far as limiting access, other than business hours when the district is in operation. That's what we're looking at. Is that correct?
Yes, I would say business hours. I know up to this point, I tend to work on weekends, so Mr. Hagan has contacted me, and I've allowed him to come in at that time because I'm there, and he puts his video in and leaves. So, I'm able to monitor that, but I can't guarantee that I would be available every weekend.
Well, I don't think you should be asking.
No, it's not your responsibility.
And there are no other places that he would be able to set up his business. We know.
Well, we know that because that's where he's at the office, district
I know,
office, right?
But I'm just wondering, since this has happened, has there been any exploration as far as other options? There are no other options.
I had asked Mr. Hagan, he had indicated to me that he thought Mayor Roosh was checking back with Charter or was looking into things, but from the last conversation I had with him, he did not believe that there was anything else available out there. But
so Sunday church services just wouldn't be put in until Monday. As soon as someone's at the district office.
And the Friday night football games would be not on late at night on Friday, probably, as they always were, or whatever sporting event he had taped on a Friday night, or.
It wouldn't be until Monday if that's what you're talking about.
It would certainly change the schedule that we're accustomed to.
I've been trying to think of other options as well, and I don't take this lightly at all, but because there is community support of Mr. Hagan, is there interest in a fundraiser that would allow him to obtain the funds to be able to put his equipment in at City Hall? And, I don't know, I'm just, brainstorming, are there some of those options where until the money is raised for him to be able to move his equipment, that, you know, he's able to operate during business hours, that might be an option. You know, as you...
A certain amount of
I-
time.
And I don't know how much effort...
And then his schedule would be back and more amenable to what the community's used to and would like, I imagine, but I mean, it's possibilities.
And that would be, of course, if the city were open to that as well, so
Cindy, if he does not have any keys now,
Correct.
if somebody was to say limited access, what would that entail on your part, or the district office part?
That would mean that primarily he would be able to come into the building from approximately 7:30 until 4:30, Monday through Friday, to put in videotapes.
And that would be it? So this other business about Friday night football games, if that was to happen, or church, they'd have to have
You'd
different
have to have a
times.
different schedule,
Yeah,
right,
you'd
than
have
how
to.
it had currently been.
Like Monday night football or something
Right,
instead of Friday night.
right.
I'll see it. Myself, I could support that, if you thought so, and if the board felt so. That would cut out the business of the key. He would be limited access throughout the week, not on weekends. Keep that out of the picture. But settling in with what the board thought and the city thinks, you know, it's ultimately our decision to make here. And in support of Greg, as I said that I was, this could be a possibility, a real possibility.
Would we want to consider a probationary period of 6 months and revisit it, or is it best just to make a
That
decision?
might be good too.
I mean, just to...
And revisit it depending upon how things go and
I think so.
either expand it or not.
I think the public would want that. At least that.
It's an option.
It's just a thought. I mean, if you
If you don't
have
think
that.
any probation, but that still means he can operate. It's just that we're more observant of what's going on there.
This is all very uncomfortable. There was also the other issue, and Mr. Hennessy sort of touched on that. We're still going to great lengths to basically give someone a business through our district facility where they have then breached the trust that we originally gave them, to the extent that they're broadcasting private church events. And I mean, I think that's also an issue. I don't know if we're examining this, if the scope of what he's doing there is also an issue.
Well, the only, I'm not sure there's been competition out there for someone else to, supply that service to the community. I don't know, I guess, I don't know if there's anyone else that's ever attempted to, do that service also. So it's kind of unique in that way, because it's not something most people would pick up and do, but it is more of a service almost than it is a money, I mean, it is a livelihood for him, certainly, but provides also a service that the community enjoys, but
Yeah.
Many many people of the community, especially the elderly and disabled. I can't tell you how many times I'm in a grocery store and somebody comes up to me and says, "I've seen you on TV." And the only way they'd see me on TV is if they watch Greg's channel. I was really surprised at first. Now I'm very used to it, but it's a tremendous amount of people that use this. Tremendous amount.
No other way
I
to-
again hate to ask this, but I need to ask for clarification because I'm fairly new to the community and not understanding it. I'm reading this as it says that the city of Toma has worked with Charter Communication and the Hagen Sports Network. So who actually owned it? The city of Toma or Hagen Sports?
No, Hagen Sports is their own business.
To go back further, Charter has, by law, has to provide some public access channels, and Greg is one of those. And the city and the school have the other. It's a city one, I believe, but it's housed out of the school.
The PEG channel?
PEG channel.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
And so there's the private business and there's the public access one. Charter provides. It's a charter business.
Okay.
I think another way you have to look at this too is the fact of what Brian said about utilizing the facility to make a living. If you go back through those 27 years and think about the volunteer service that he did and didn't charge anything, that was brought up by some of the people. And if you look at Greg, and it doesn't matter to me where he lives, but he's not making $1 million on this issue. He's doing it in those 27 years for the city of Toma. Plain and simple. The people in it. I'm 100% sure of that. If he was wanting to make a buck, there's other things he could do to make a lot of money. But in support of Greg, he hasn't done that. He's been very diligent on athletes in this town, senior citizens, and he mentioned Mr. Ed at the teepee, and also interviewing the mayors back in history. To make it plain and simple, he's a natural at what he does. He's very good, and he hasn't asked for a whole bunch of dough to make it that way. And some, I don't want to say big thing, I am, and whatever we can do to support him away from this issue that he got himself into. I certainly can't stand here. Certainly can't stand here and say I've been perfect. And the way this thing got blown up, it is a big deal to a lot of people.
Well, unless people want to take a recess or, bring it back, I guess I would look for either a motion to just deny access or to allow access on a very supervised basis, as we discussed. But if under the supervised, again, I'm troubled by the fact that there's some obligation on us to supervise, and it certainly should not be the superintendent's responsibility to take on that.
Can I ask, I'm not as familiar with where that room is located within the district office, but is there physically a phone in there now?
Currently, there is not, because we have moved much of our AV equipment to another location. But the plan is to move that equipment to the other location where there would be, again, telephone access.
So the location Mr. Hagan would have to use would be a different location than right now.
Right.
And that would be,
But if you have access to the building, you have access to a telephone.
right, but if there's people there,
Right.
yeah. But what I'm saying is if you're in an enclosed room with no one else in there, which could be,
It only takes Mr. Hagan 2 minutes at the most. I mean, he comes in, can pop in the tape, and, I mean, it's not like he needs to be there for any extended period of time. It's very quick.
At this time, I guess I make a motion that we allow Greg to continue to use the facilities. Because I don't think it's going to be passed if I don't put this on, I'm also going to say that it would be during business, the aforementioned business hours, Monday through Friday. Yes.
I just had a question. Summertime hours, are there staff present?
The building is usually, yeah, there's someone there from 7:30 to 4:30.
There was also the suggestion of some kind of probationary
I don't,
period. Is that,
no, that's
No.
not in there because I think that if something is found on a phone record that isn't quite right or something, I think that will come to the board and that will be that. I don't think it needs probation because I think that if anything happened to break trust again, that would be that.
It'd be over.
that's true. I mean, he's there at the discretion of
The board?
the board anyway, with or without any incidents. We can always,
Yes, they can
Revisit it.
always come back here. I don't think we need to,
it wouldn't add
Yeah.
much to
no.
put on probationary. Well, there's a motion to allow Mr. Hagan to continue using the facilities Monday through Friday during work hours. Is that correct, Ms. Gupta?
Yes.
Is there a second to that motion?
I will second it.
There's a motion and a second on allowing Mr. Hagan to use the facilities during the times just described. Further questions or discussion?
Mrs. Artie, where's the location of once the move would take place? Is this also within the district office? or-
Yes, it is. The area that had been the AV room has become primarily a curriculum storage area, and Mrs. Bethhauser, who works there along with Mr. Hurd, we have moved their equipment and materials into the large that used to be the conference room that we had board meetings in previously, so that has been rearranged, and it's my understanding that the equipment will eventually be moved in there as well.
Just wanted to verify it was the same building, the same...
Yes.
Anything else?
Well, knowing what a difficult situation that this is, I mean, and I don't know how to throw this in there, and I agree with them, you know, the limited access, but perhaps it would be a recommendation that Mr. Hagan look at some fundraising or something to, you know, or talk to the city, I mean, in the future to see if there's some other location, knowing that there's...
City has no money. We're in the same boat the school district is in. I'm sorry.
She's saying a fundraiser.
But if,
Yeah.
I know, but just a suggestion.
Well-
I mean, knowing that he
Yeah.
has that support out there. I mean,
That's-
you know,
Good point.
there's a lot of tension here, so I mean, just throwing it out there. I concur and I support your decisions, and I do support him utilizing the facility, during normal business hours and things like that. I think from being up here in the last 3 years, he provides, I've heard nothing but positive about going home on Friday nights after the game and the families watching the games again. And unfortunately, I don't have charter, so I don't get it, but I heard it's a great, and the church and things like that. So that's just my recommendation.
No, and that point was brought up about for allowing the possibility of allowing him access for a specific time by which he would then have to transfer somewhere else. I mean, that's not the motion now, but that was one of the suggestions, which gets to your point. If that's something you feel strongly enough that you could ask to amend the motion, I don't know if that's supported by the others, but or if you were just making the observation.
I'm kind of making an observation and asking if that would be supported by the others, as not necessarily put a timeline on it, but something that we'd like to discuss further, maybe 6 months down the road as a board.
Okay.
I mean,
one thing that Cindy said, and that strikes me too, is he doesn't have to spend a length of time in there, in that place where he goes. It could be a short visit and gone, whatever it takes him. I mean, he doesn't have to spend all day in that room for the job he's going to do. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And speaking of Cindy, who I've always had a lot of respect for, a board member would like to know your feel, what we're talking about.
It's a difficult situation, but as so many people have said, I am not perfect myself. I have also benefited greatly from Mr. Hagan's services. I have every football game my son played in.
Yeah.
So knowing that parents in our community could be potentially denied that bothers me, because it is very valuable.
He's been a valuable asset
Yes.
to the community.
But again, there's been a huge breach of trust in my estimation.
Very, very big.
And I do believe that if the community values Greg, then maybe the community needs to come together to find a way for him to be able to air his programs when the people can benefit from them being aired. And so having district use during business hours, if that's what the board decides, that's fine. But that doesn't help those elderly people on Sundays. So how does that become available? And that, I guess, in the football games on Friday nights, being able to go back and watch that. Maybe the community needs to come together to find out a way, to figure out a way to have those services provided at that time. I think Kathy's point is
Very possible.
well made.
Yeah.
But with you, I think it is a community effort, or Mr.
Right,
Hagan's
it's
effort
not
with
a
the
school
community and
district
that.
responsibility.
Yeah.
And I am greatly bothered as well that I feel like all of a sudden we've become the bad guys. And we were, I don't want to say kind enough, but we recognized the value of Mr. Hagan's services when the board agreed to allow him to use the facility.
Yeah.
We were doing what we felt was best for the community and for our school district. I'm sure there are people out there that are not going to be happy with whatever decision the board makes.
Exactly.
Because I'm sure there are people that have not come forward who would say, boy, I have some concerns about him continuing to use the district facility. But it's unfortunately a decision that's come back to us, and I wish maybe there were some people here supporting the school board, because I feel like all of a sudden you're out there hanging when it was a gesture on the part of the city for us to do this initially. So it's a hard decision. There's no question about it.
Not only do I respect you a great deal, that gentleman next to you, I do.
Well, I
What's
can
your take,
tell you,
Greg?
I'm at the start of this, I would have said no. Not because I don't appreciate what Greg has done over the years. I think he does a marvelous job. He provides marvelous service to the school district. But it created a nexus now that somebody else's issue is now your issue. And our mission is not to provide services. To be quite frank about it, our mission isn't to provide other business in the community with resources to do their work of business. Not that I'm not supportive of it, and I understand completely why the city and the school district did it, but it created one more issue for us, and now we're here. Do I trust Greg coming in? Absolutely. I don't have any problem with him. I'm not worried about in the least bit of him coming in Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 4:30 p.m. And at some point in time, I would expect, if that relationship continues and that trust builds, for that maybe relationship to change in the future. But on the same sense, and I can guarantee you that if this was a school district employee, they probably would not be working with us. So you also need to be thinking about that a little bit. Because if it does come up in the future, you're going to be faced with the same questions. And that's all I have to say, but tough spot. I'm glad I don't have to make the decision because I'm supportive both ways.
Well, I appreciate you both speaking to it. Mr. Grosstein had the courage to ask.
Well, I respect them both deeply, and
we all do.
Yeah, their answers to questions I fully appreciate. So.
I think it's a good point Mr. Goder made that, trust can be rebuilt, but we'll just have to see where it goes, so Ken.
Right.
And Mr. Hagan may find that these hours are limiting, and he may need to,
Right.
as he's using the facility now, he could explore other possibilities, as Mrs. Mosley talked about, so
Right.
he needs to consider that also. I don't think that needs to be in the motion, but...
Yeah.
And I would say, I did receive an email from a concerned citizen, and I think Cindy got the same email, that is of the opposite opinion, and I respect everybody's opinion as much as I do the next person's. And also talk to people that probably aren't as forgiving, so I guess it's kind of back on your lap to
It's out there.
decide what that is.
Yeah, I suspect whichever way we go, there's going to be a crowd that could find we've made a bad decision. But it's been discussed fully. Everyone's provided good input, and I'm at least glad that I'm part of a board that has instincts to give people second chances and try to find a way to help people if at all possible. So I'm still not entirely comfortable with the decision, but I agree with most of everything that's been said here today. So with that being said, there's a motion and a second, and it would be to allow Mr. Hagan access Monday through Friday during work hours to use the district office. Is there any further discussion?
No keys.
No keys?
No key.
Anything else? Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
The ayes have it, the motion carries. So the motion passes to allow Mr. Hagan to use the facility as stated, Monday through Friday during work hours, business hours, which would be
7:30 to 4:30.
7:30 to 4:30. Okay. I appreciate everyone's civil discourse and thoughtful input on a very difficult decision.